Welcome back, everyone. I'm Lana Zach. What you see there is former President Donald Trump on the floor at the Republican National Convention in Milwaukee's Fiserv Forum. Now, he's doing his run-through now. He's expected to deliver his speech tomorrow night, formally accepting his party's nomination. This will be the first time, actually, that we hear from the former president since the rally shooting that took place on Saturday, that attempted assassination. Trump, for his part, has said that he has reworked his speech since that failed assassination attempt. And as a result, he's expected to turn his focus towards unifying not only the party, but also the country in the wake of this act of political violence. Again, this is just the run through. As you can see, people giving him direction about what will take place there in Milwaukee later tomorrow. We are covering all the news coming from the Republican National Convention, and I want to bring in now CBS News political correspondent Caitlin Huey-Burns. She's covering the convention for us there in Milwaukee. So, Caitlin, we saw that they have taken down all of the bright lights. We can see the Republican candidate there walking the paces of the stage. Tell us more about what this walkthrough is and what we expect to hear from the former president when he speaks tomorrow.
Lana, good to see you. So I am up in our position on a balcony overseeing the convention hall, and Donald Trump is actually right behind me. They've turned out all the lights so he can do this walkthrough, but I am essentially right above the stage, so he is right behind us doing the walkthrough, and I think you see on the side of your screen there, talking to the director and going through. This is standard for all of the speakers have been given this opportunity to walk through everything, but this is significant because this is the first time that we are seeing Donald Trump on the convention stage. He has been here every night this week, but he has not spoken publicly. And so this is significant because tomorrow night we are going to hear from him for the first time. So you're seeing these pictures on your screen right now. He's also, of course, heavily flanked by security on this stage. You also see that he is continuing to wear the ear patch on the ear that was grazed by that bullet. So we are expecting to hear from him tomorrow night. And this has been a convention to nominate him. But of course, that assassination attempt has been hovering over all of this. Lots of different speakers have changed their planned remarks to incorporate the events of the weekend, and also trying in some cases to set a different kind of tone than they otherwise would have. We're waiting. You can see him approaching the microphone there. That's where he will be speaking later this week. Earlier on Monday, he came to this convention hall for the first time, and the crowd was visibly moved by seeing him in person for the first time since that assassination attempt. Last night, he also sat in the family box and watched as former rivals stood on stage, endorsed him, and urged the party to support him. It was significant, Lana, hearing from people last night like Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, who challenged Donald Trump for the nomination. Former UN Ambassador Nikki Haley, who also had challenged Trump for the nomination. And I was in a position right off the to the right of the stage, and you could have a view of the speaker and a view of the president, the former president as well. And he was really seeming to kind of soak in the idea that there had been many Republicans running against him, and now they are unified behind him. So that was a message that this party was trying to put forward for this convention.
And Caitlin, this is a man who understands the power of a public image, who understands production. And of course, with his many years as a reality TV star, fronting The Apprentice. And I see him talking through all of these details. And we have to acknowledge that a lot of people have been talking about his body language, his mood, questions about how that event, that assassination attempt, changed him. Can you tell us anything more about that?
Yeah. It's a really good point, Lana, and you can see the lights have now gone on behind us as he is taking to the podium there for this run-through. Several of those closest to Trump, including his sons and his advisors, have said that, of course, this event has changed everything. What's been significant about Trump, as you mentioned, he is, of course, a former reality television star. Much of his campaign is focused on the theatrics of politics and performance. And what was significant this week is that he hasn't spoken at all. The body language has been kind of the words that we've been able to kind of take away. And you can tell, at least in his body language, that he has been seeming to kind of soak in this moment and, you know, obviously taking stock, apparently, of what happened. But also, it's quite remarkable that it was just on Saturday that this all happened. And so there's been a point from the campaign ever since that assassination attempt to say that the campaign must go on, the convention must go on, and they're making an effort to show that that they want to move forward with their original plan. So having him appear here on Monday, having him go forward with these speeches, and just be seen in public in this kind of setting is a significant message being sent by the campaign.
And we heard from his new pick to become the vice president, or the Republican nominee, JD Vance. He was speaking in Milwaukee about that moment that you and I were covering, Caitlin, when there was an assassination attempt against Donald Trump. And he praised the man that he hopes will be his boss in the Oval Office. And he talked about how Trump was trying to unify the country. And given that what we're hearing from our sources is that Trump has reworked his speech to try and bring together not only the party, but the country more, I'm wondering if you can shed any light into more of that editorial information.
Yeah, the former president has said that he had a different speech planned for Thursday, and he essentially scrapped that piece in light of those events and has a different speech planned. You mentioned JD Vance is going to be at center stage tonight, his kind of introduction to the country in this kind of setting. And you can argue that the position of vice president becomes even more pronounced given everything that just happened. Mm-hmm. There's a spotlight on the vice presidential candidate because of that question of, can this person step in the event that something like what we saw over the weekend happens, that has put an even greater emphasis on the role of vice president. So for JD Vance's speech tonight, they are trying to emphasize his biography, his experience as an Iraq War veteran, and he is essentially seen here as the new generation of the Republican Party under Donald Trump.
And I'm hoping we can stay with this theme a little bit longer, Caitlin, because for some people, JD Vance is well known. They read Hillbilly Elegy. They know about the movie that was made. But for others, this is really going to be a first introduction to Vance and his family for many people outside of Ohio. Can you tell us more about the former president and his relationship with the Ohio senator, more about why he decided that JD Vance was the person he wanted to have by his side?
That's right. The two are very close, but it is interesting because, as we've spoken about before, JD Vance was a top critic of Donald Trump back in 2016. In 2016, he published a memoir called Hillbilly Elegy, which talked about his roots and his family in Appalachia. And he was kind of seen at the time as the kind of translator of the Trump voter. But he wasn't supportive of Trump at the time. In fact, he said a lot of very pointed and harsh things about the former president, but has since, come around. And that's kind of a message, Lana, that you've been hearing from speakers here this week. I mentioned DeSantis and Haley and others who were critical of the former president, but have, come around to the position of supporting him. And that's a message that this campaign wants to send, and it's trying to court voters and unify the Republican Party and rally them up ahead of next time. It's also important to know that JD Vance is very close with Donald Trump's son, Don Jr. They have a close relationship. And Don Jr. was, kind of at the forefront of pushing JD Vance and elevating his profile. JD Vance was one of the first senators to endorse Donald Trump all the way back in January of 2023. And he did so in an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal focused on foreign policy, specifically in opposition to funding of Ukraine. And that's significant because I think that's going to be a line as we're focused on foreign policy tonight, in a contrast to kind of the more traditional wings of the Republican Party. But there's no doubt that this is a play for the Midwest, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, where I am right now. This is the path of victory that the Biden campaign has laid out. And by picking someone like JD Vance, who they are hoping can appeal in those states, is a sign that this is a challenge to the Biden administration. But also, something to know about JD Vance is his connections to Silicon Valley, having worked in kind of that world as well.
Peter Thiel
he
so
was a prolific exactly, Lana. He was a prolific fundraiser for Donald Trump. Out of all the shortlist contenders, he had raised the most money for Donald Trump, was very connected to those big money backers in Silicon Valley and helping to kind of get a lot of money to the Trump campaign and various groups. And so that is also going to be kind of part of his portfolio, so to speak, as he goes forward in the campaign. It's also, the vice president candidate serves as the chief attack dog. And so we are kind of looking to see kind of how that plays out in a vice presidential debate, perhaps later this summer.
Yes, very interested in the details of that. And our viewers just saw behind you, Caitlin, as the former president made his way off of the stage, along with all of the folks that were helping him out. Let's talk a little bit more about what we're going to see tonight and in anticipation of what we're going to see tomorrow. JD Vance, as you mentioned, very well educated, having gone to Yale from humble middle class roots. We heard in his first public remarks him going after President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris. But we also heard him really emphasizing the economy. And the theme tonight is supposed to be about security. Given his military background, do you expect that that's really where his focus will be in his remarks? Or do you think that the vice presidential nominee for the Republican Party will also continue to bring in those other themes that you were mentioning?
Yeah, Lana, I think it's going to be kind of a combination of all of the above. And while a lot of people may have heard of who JD Vance is through that memoir, they don't quite know much about him politically, perhaps. This is kind of the introduction not only to this group here, but also to the country. And it's significant, too, because he's going to be introduced by his wife, Usha Vance, who is a Yale attorney in her own right. And it's going to be a significant contrast that you are going to see. I mean, he has a young family, 3 small children. And this is a way for the campaign to kind of put forward this new generation of leadership, as you say. But talking to those close to the campaign, they are trying to emphasize his military experience and also his, Midwestern Appalachian roots, especially as the economy is front of voters' minds right now. That is something that they are hoping he can, appeal to. And it's interesting, Lana, because while he is and this election is reflective of how he is kind of the heir to the kind of MAGA Republican Party, he's also worked across the aisle in some cases on some, populist economic issues. He had a bill with Elizabeth Warren designed to claw back executive pay for banks that had failed. This is in light of the crash of Silicon Valley Bank. So that's also something that those close to him have kind of emphasized. So kind of look for those threads for tonight. But tonight really is this introduction to the broader American public from the Ohio senator.
And we will be watching all of that. Caitlin Huey-Burns, so much appreciate you talking to us about all of this. We are, of course, going to have more coverage from the RNC at the top of the hour. For now, a short break. I'm Lana Zak, and you're watching CBS News 24/7.